sometimes when you have done well in your career and you've done well in corporate, you assume you can just take all of that and apply it in business, and it's really not like that. And I had a successful business in 2016, a very successful business with Yali Financial Services. So I think
I love how you now embracing that you're a podcast.
Ooh,
You're the struggle to get to here. Like, girl, you're a podcaster. Own it.
Own it.
So well done.
Thank
you are indeed.
I think we've got like over 32,000 views we've had. So I guess that means I am a podcaster. Where I am now is I'm healing still. But there's light at the end of the tunnel.
It is so bright.
Hi there. Welcome to another episode of the Fanatic Mindset with me, Tlalane Ntuli. This is episode number 10, right? Milestone episode. I cannot believe it. It's a milestone episode. Really excited. Stop clapping.
It's a 10th
You're making me nervous.
It's a 10th
That is the perfect introduction as to who my guest is, guys. So my guest is me. And I'm being interviewed by my best friend, Linda Lamjangeka.
Yay, you did the click, girl.
I did the click.
Ooh,
I did the click. I'm so excited. It took me over 15 years to get that right.
But you got there.
Yeah. So for the 10th episode, we decided that maybe it's about time we opened up a little bit about who I am, my story, maybe pulled up my skirt a little bit for people to see under the skirt. People keep saying to me, this is going to be the most watched episode. I personally don't see how that would be the most watched.
Why not, though?
I don't know. My story is not all that interesting, I don't think.
I think your story is quite interesting, and I think you've lived a life that's worth sharing and talking about. And I think you've been bold. Well done for opening up and really just being okay with talking about your imperfect journey.
Yeah.
Just
should we call that is such a good name for a podcast, Imperfect Journey.
Whoa, we just you can't be changing names again.
Okay.
It is what it is right now. But I think it's just people look at you and think you've got it all together. No, it's not that. And today you're just gonna, I guess, share who you are, your journey, where you've been, I guess where you're trying to get to. And I think it's a perfect opportunity for you to yap away, because every time you have a guest, you just wanna take
just over. To make it clear why you know that is Linda was also always somewhere in the back directing us and saying, guys, this is a better shot. And I don't even think we would be on our 10th episode without you. In fact, I know we wouldn't, because the whole concept came from you, and you had been pushing me for the longest time to do a podcast, and I'd been saying, firstly, I don't even understand the concept of a podcast. Secondly, I just want to decorate beautiful spaces. And you were the person who kind of said you can pull the two together, because you really, you speak really well, but at the same time, you create beautiful spaces. Why can't the two things live together?
I think this is a perfect time for you to tell us why this space, because I know your shows all the times, like you tell people you're a space. So
why this space? Space? So this is obviously a completely different room from the room that we typically use, which is the former lounge. And this is the TV lounge. This is where I spend most of my time. This is also where my family and I gather in the evenings. This is really and truly my favorite space. Someone once said to me, Tlalane, you wear your house like a blanket. If I were to choose a room that is a blanket, it would be this room. And as much as it's difficult to always open doors to different people coming into your home to shoot the episode, I have found it actually quite healing in a way, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. In this space, obviously there's an L-shaped couch. Gray is always the best color for any family room, because it gets dirty. The dogs are running around. I don't know where they are now, but they're typically like jumping all over the couch. And then you can't do an L-shaped couch without big, beautiful cushions and different textures as well. So that's what I really love about this space. And then my favorite lamp in the corner. Actually, I don't know if we can see that. If it is in shot, it's my
Yeah.
absolute favorite lounge. Lamp.
Yeah.
And then in this space we've used this rugged rug. What are they called?
Yeah.
There's a name for it.
You tell us. You're
Okay.
this fanatic,
Yeah.
space fanatic.
And it's great because the kids lie down on
Mm.
it, especially in winter.
Yeah.
When the heater on, the gas heater's on, they just lie here, and so this is truly where you will
It
always
is.
find me when I'm home.
No, that's so true, because I think in your journey, and I think let's start to wait all kind of detoured. And I'll call it detour because it was unplanned. You did not think in your wildest dreams you'll be here every day, all the time, just hosting a podcast and looking at spaces. Tell us how you got here.
We're not gonna cry, ne?
No, you should.
Because I don't have a tissue
You
near
should.
me.
No, girl.
Okay, all
No,
right. Well,
thanks.
if we do, we do. So, I've been very much a corporate person. I've had corporate roles, and I think I've done well for myself in corporate. Never ever thought I would do anything outside of corporate until I think it was around 2016. A friend of mine and I started an insurance company. And at the time I was young, maybe ignorant is not the right word, but young and hopeful. Nothing could stop my dreams. I was going to do it all. And we got funding from the PIC, and we built a fully fledged insurance business.
Successful.
And it was successful. We did 10,000 sales by the end of it. And then come COVID 2021, it all falls apart. But in my career, I've always been the kind of person who will get retrenched this month, and then a month later, I've got a job.
Yeah, summer season.
Yeah.
It's been your life.
That's what you call it.
And then winter landed.
Yeah, winter landed.
Yeah.
And winter actually started when I lost the business. I've never actually thought about that until I had to reflect back. And then I think about 3 months after we decided to liquidate the business, it was called Yalu Financial Services. I got a job, and I thought to myself, I have landed my dream job.
It was.
Oh, and I remember you getting messages from people saying your friend has arrived, and I was like, my friend, we have arrived. And I did. I believed for a while, and for a while I was in this kind of romantic space with the workplace, and I was on my honeymoon. When the honeymoon ended.
And it unexpectedly.
It ended, and I got to realize that this is not the right space for me. It wasn't the right space for me mentally. It wasn't the right space for me emotionally, particularly given the loss I had just suffered with my business. And so that space took a lot out of me. And I had people in that role who had reported to me previously. And I think it's always such a compliment when somebody who has reported to you previously comes back and says, I want to work for you. So 2 of the guys that reported to me in that role had reported to me in other companies. And they both applied for the jobs because they were like, we want to work with you. And the one lady would always say to me, this is not the Tlalane I remember. This is not the Tlalane I remember.
Which it wasn't only work that saw that. I think there's a time as well when I'm like, but where are you?
Yeah.
We've lost you.
Yeah.
As much as that was a big loss that just really changed the trajectory of your life.
Yeah.
What it did.
Yeah.
We gained you back. You gained yourself back. I don't know if you want to reflect on that, on how you're coming back to yourself, because I think you're still on that journey.
I'm definitely still on that journey. So this space, this platform was actually created from a very deep space of pain. A space where I went through feelings of rejection. I went through feelings of, where do I belong? Who am I? I've always defined myself by virtue of my role. I have sat on excos since I was 32. So I don't know anything different, And for all of that to not be here anymore when I left this role in this job, in this company, because I just, it just wasn't the right space for me. And I'm sure that people who thrive in that space, I didn't. It was an emotionally draining space. And, I had to go back and think about, what does it mean? Who am I? Without the corporate roles,
Yeah.
without the titles, without the excos, who am I? I'm still very much on that journey. So if you ask me today, who am I? The answer might not be the same as it was even 3 months ago, and it might not be the same 3 months from now. So I did get lost a little bit for a while, and I mean really lost, like in bed, not getting up, kind of lost.
Sure.
And so this was one of the things, this podcast, that pulled me out of bed,
Yeah.
that got me to look forward to doing something
Yeah.
at least once a month.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot to put it together, you know, so it kept me focused.
Yeah.
And then I tried a business, which was the worst decision I'd ever made. A business,
Tell us, do
which
tell.
is how this podcast was born, out
Yeah.
of a business called Space Fanatics. It
That's
might not have
right.
been the worst decision because it kind of
No.
evolved into this.
I think every experience you've had, it's placed you here. It was your journey, it was your path. As much as we look back and you're like, but that didn't make sense. Why did I? But when you look back and see where you are, the building blocks are from that. But do tell us a little bit about Space Fanatics, you know, because that for me still speaks to you're a space fanatic yourself.
I am a space
you know,
fanatic.
and that's a dream. I don't think it's completely gone.
Yeah.
It's just you're still on.
It's
refining.
evolved.
It's evolved.
Yeah.
So I think speak a bit about that.
So Space Fanatics was a business I started with the intention of going into people's homes and decorating and refurbishing, maybe even eventually getting to a point where I could build from scratch. It was a dream, and I had big hopes for it. And it was stemming from the fact that I'm a space fanatic, which is why the name Space Fanatics. I partnered with a friend at the time, and you know, it just didn't. I think sometimes when you have done well in your career and you've done well in corporate, you assume you can just take all of that and apply it in business, and it's really not like that. And I had a successful business in 2016, a very successful business with Yali Financial Services. So I think I took it for granted that Space Fanatics would take off, and it didn't. It didn't. It went through lots of difficult times, but like we say, this idea, the podcast, was actually originally, and if people go back and watch that first episode, it was originally a platform we built to facilitate the spaces that we're creating, and we wanted to demonstrate and show people this is a space we've created and this is why we made the choices that we've made. And then I started getting people saying, you're so conversational. We want real conversations. Oh, you had the Tlalane, who was the Naila Acha entrepreneur. We want more of those kind of conversations. And so we kept it as Space Fanatics, you recall, for a long time. And then it dawned to me eventually that, at the end of the day, I may be a space fanatic, but I need to be open to the idea of using my passion for creating beautiful spaces in a different way. And that's why for every single guest we do a different set, because that is my opportunity of bringing out my space fanaticism. And I'm still able then to do my deco thing and to create beautiful spaces. And so one of my biggest lessons in the journey of this podcast is that we sometimes limit ourselves to thinking that our passion needs to exist in its most natural form or in the most expected way. So I'm passionate about deco, which means I should be an interior decorator. Not necessarily. You can take your passion for interior decorating and apply it to something else, and you create magic. I also, in my reflection around that, said to myself, especially when I was having conversations with my guests and asking them, like, how has your passion or your fanaticism shown up in your life? And realizing that it always has been there from the very beginning of my career. And that's what made me such a great marketer, because I'm a creative at heart. I see things, as marketers, the way we see creative is not the same way that a consumer or somebody else would see it. So it made me actually appreciate that my fanaticism for interior deco, which is really a creative process, is why I'm, I did so well as a marketer.
But I think what this has also just unearthed is you thought you were just a marketer, you were a space fanatic, but I think you've discovered that you're a great host. You know how to hold down conversations. You know how to now knock on doors, which is something
Yeah.
You just never did,
Yeah.
because everything was just
I
landed
was
on a
just like,
plot.
oh,
No,
you know,
no. But
there was always a PA.
there was
There was always,
yeah.
you know, somebody who reported to me who I could say, do this.
Speak about that transition.
Sure, girl. Life will humble
Go
you.
rough, girl. Yo,
I can honestly say it's been not just humbling from the perspective of thankfulness, and I'm very grateful for the journey, but humbled as in when everything is taken away and you have to build from scratch. When you don't have anyone to WhatsApp and say, can you check if the guest is coming? What time are they coming? And then you don't just come out of the space and it's set up and you just sit there and you know, and I recall those moments where I'd have to do videos for the organization and I would literally be WhatsApped and said, it's your turn now. And I would walk down and I'd be like, oh no. I'd just be like, ooh, this space looks lovely. Where do you need me? They would mic me up. I'd sit there, I'd speak, and I'd go. But actually, I noticed this speaking thing and the hosting thing in particular some time back. I didn't realize it as a skill I could use. In my previous role, I actually used to do a lot of facilitating of the like kind of conversations and you know executive conversations or you know staff engagements and things like that. So every time when I thought of this space and having these conversations, I had to go back there and think about how I did it then. But what made this particularly difficult, I don't know, difficult?
It is difficult.
Yeah, difficult, was the fact that now there was nobody picking the furniture. There was nobody, you know, I had to do all of that myself. I enjoyed putting the deco together. But having to knock on doors that I've never knocked on has probably been the most difficult part of the journey.
Having to think about who's next, having to monitor every show. Is it performing okay? Where do you change? I think it's, I mean, I've just been in so much awe watching you go down like that. And I think it was hard. At the beginning.
It was hard. It was very hard.
I think as much as this is really the point of this chat is to talk about you, but I sit here and I'm like, there's just so many lessons that a lot of people can and I want you to share and just dig deep. And I know I'm throwing you off here, but your mental health at this point, because it's something you still battle with. How are you managing? Because it feels like everything has been stripped away and that has taken a big knock.
No, definitely. I mean, I've always had mental health issues. I was first diagnosed with depression when I was 16. At the time, I mean, you can imagine, I was 16, 30 years ago. So at the time, mental health wasn't a thing. And at the time, you know, I think it was difficult for my parents to even understand what the doctors were talking about. My sister was a newly qualified pharmacist. And everything that was medical, we spoke to her. And so she was just like, she can't go on medication. She will be fine, you know. And I think, you know, for all of them, it still is really, really difficult to accept. And because mental health is not a physical illness that people can see, it's difficult for people to accept it. So, you know, I kind of struggled with it as a teenager into my 20s. Then when I had my son, I was 28 and I had really bad postnatal depression. That was, I think, one of the worst times up until this recent year. Then I was on medication and I have never come off antidepressants. But this journey, in the last 18 months specifically, I think I have had to deal with the loss of my business, which I hadn't really had an opportunity to deal with because I had gone straight into a new role, Yalu. And then, of course, I had to deal with the loss of my title. You know, the job I thought was the, do you know what I mean? Was beat, and just feeling like I have lost even my sense of purpose. And that has kept me in bed very many days when I should have been getting up, when I should have been making breakfast, when I should have been taking a walk. I have made I've made the choice to stay in bed, you know. And that's just, it's a very difficult illness. And I think the most painful part of mental health is when people think they can just talk you out of it. When people say, my sisters, you know, I'm one of four. I've got three older sisters. They're very protective, but they're also very bossy. And so they get quite frustrated with the idea of, you've literally spent the whole week in bed. This is ridiculous. Get up, you know. But the truth is, in that moment, I don't feel like there's anything to get up for. I don't feel like there's anything to look forward to. But I'm also very blessed. I think I've got kids that have had to grow up with a mom with a mental illness, mental health issue. And even though they may not be able to verbalize it, kids learn to live with the circumstances, you know. I've got a husband who I've been with since I was 18.
Sure.
And so he has seen every kind of every iteration of this movie, every down. Like, he has seen me in every type of down cycle that you can think of. And he's been very supportive, and he's the one person who will say, if you need to stay in bed today, it's okay, but it's only got to be today. And then, of course, friendships like you, where you will come and you will make me a soup. You remember that day? You gotta eat it. You gotta eat. And so I think even the illness, even the last 18 months, there's a purpose in that. It hasn't been revealed yet, but I'm confident that when that happens, it'll all kind of make sense. Maybe the other thing to point out, which is important, is to say, I am so rooted in my relationship with God. It has not been an easy relationship. I still get very angry with him. But if there is one thing I know for sure, is that my God lives. And so because of that, there have been days where I'm like, okay, I'm not fighting today. You fighting. I'm not getting out of this bed. You fighting.
I think just to double click on your relationship with God, I think I look at you, and all these years, everything was going well.
Oh yeah,
really. I'm
like you say,
you that guy loves me more than he loves me. You know, so
God loves you. Why are you always in the summer?
Always, and you say God is good, God is amazing, hallelujah, because things are good. But now you had to really believe it, and it's been difficult for you to say God is good.
Oh yeah,
to say God is with me.
Oh,
God loves me.
Yeah.
But what this has also done, you don't say it superficially now.
Yeah, there's no definitely.
Yeah.
But the thing as well that I think we don't talk about the rough seasons is that in the rough seasons, God cleanses.
Yes.
There are relationships that need to fall away.
Yeah.
Because they will not, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't pour into you what you need. And what God does is he removes all of that.
Yeah.
All the pieces of superficialness, if there is such a word, that you had from the summer, God takes that away. And you are left in the winter with what is real and what you're taking with you to the next summer. And I mean, there's lots of Bible stories. I could talk about Joseph's Bible story about how he knew when he interpreted the king's dream that there was going to be 7 years of a tough season, and then 7 years of great season. And they knew that in the good season they had to work on safeguarding what they had. I think we don't have that as people. In the summer when things are good, we're taking pictures of with everyone. We don't even know people. You don't know what spirits you're inviting into your life. And so when the winter comes, there's a lot of work that God does where he just takes it all out. He removes the spirits. He removes the people. He removes even the cars. He removes everything that you didn't need, so that you only need him. And that's been one of my biggest lessons in this season.
This season. Yeah, and it's just been so inspiring to watch, because you've always been who you were, and I'm gonna wrap this up.
Wrap it up.
I don't
Wrap it up.
understand when
Can we talk about who I was
in your corporate, but I think the most before we wrap this up, I think what I've appreciated, as hard as it's been, and it's been such a difficult and unusual space, you've taken it all with such grace. You on this journey, and you're not giving up. And I want you to know that is huge, because a lot of people just throw in the towel, and I just want you to just keep going, my friend. Things are gonna get better, and God is still in charge.
He's
you just
in control.
Need to surrender and let go.
He's in control.
And please do your nails. I'm busy here. And
oh my God! So I forgot. You were so mad this morning.
Why?
You're like, you always do your nails. This one episode where you're probably going to use your hands the most. You have not done your nails,
it's not that bad.
It's a lot.
Still afford to. So just coming back.
I think it goes back to talking about what it takes to put even just one episode together. And there's a lot that goes into a podcast episode for the Fanatic Mindset, which is different from many other podcasts, which is why some people will release an episode a week, and I'm a one-man team. Then there's you who helps, then there's other people who help, and then there's Walter who does the recording, or but I have to be involved in every aspect. So, and because of how intentional I am about the kind of space we're trying to create with this podcast, it takes a lot of work to put a podcast episode together. So today was one of those days where I forgot to do my nails. I mean, I have to think about, for every single podcast, I'm not just thinking about the set. I'm thinking about what am I going to wear that speaks to the set, that speaks to the story of the guest. What am I going to talk about? I do prep conversations with every single guest, which often last longer than the episode itself. I have to remember those conversations, and sometimes the conversation was a month before. Then I've got to make sure on the morning of the recording, and we record them on Saturday mornings, is everything is right, ready, the set is done. So there is a lot that goes into it. But it's as I say, I think it's been a healing thing to have to be busy with all of that. So this morning, this time around, I was just like, I forgot to do my nails. It felt good though to plan for this episode, because it didn't feel like I had to do as much work. So I was like, oh, thank goodness, I have a little bit of a break. I get involved in the post-production. I get involved in the YouTube management, the channel management. I know, as you were saying a little bit earlier on, what the CTR is. Why I know when the CTR is low, and the fact that we need to do some work on the titles and the headings and the descriptions and the tags and all of that stuff. I've had to learn.
But I think you've kind of, I mean, for you to be on your 10th episode, I think you have a hang of this now. And I think I'd like us to talk about moving forward. I mean, 10 is very small for a podcast. But I think it's a good time to pause and say, whoa, and let's see how we pivot. What's next, because I know you've got a couple of exciting guests. But maybe before we do that, let's talk about the highs of the past. And 10, that's quite a big number, I think, for a one-man show.
For a one-man show, that's also monthly.
Show.
Yeah.
And it, I mean, there's been lows and there's been highs, but I'd like you to just focus on the highs of it. Let's just put some sunshine on this journey.
Finally, you're getting out of my dark season, right? Can we go to the positives? I didn't think she would take me there. So the last 9 episodes have been interesting. There have been episodes where I have literally just sat and learned. Like Tulane's episode, Naila Acha. He is like,
is it one of the
it was the second episode. Yeah. I mean, for somebody to have thought of creating an acha patay that has different flavors, it's crazy, right? But it's brilliant. Jillian's episode,
That was
where
not the makeup, the natural
the natural products. That was, I mean, I was truly there
and
and
you
like
actually got
taking it
to
in and
make your own oil, I think.
make my own oil. And maybe what I should say is it's not so much the highs of the whole season or the whole, it's every episode has its highs and every episode has its lows. um the one of my personal favorite episodes, and I'm looking at it from the perspective of how I was feeling in the moment, is the episode with Sipiwe. Because I laughed.
Yeah, he was so
he
funny.
is so
He's
funny, and
comedian.
he made me laugh. And again, in that time of my life, I was I was still in a very dark place. It was a tough time. So to be able to laugh and I remember that I was laughing with my head back, the Gugu episode for me was just, it was personal, it was deep, it was, she's just a gem, Gugu's just a gem, and she held space for me.
She did.
She does still. The last episode now, the 9th episode with Zandi. The girl can belt a tune
from just sitting. I mean, I'm like, you were like, will you?
Could you?
She just brought it.
She is one of the few voices that makes me cry just by even the first note. I always cry when Zandi sings. She is just so beautifully gifted. The one with Katleho, I still use his book to deco some of the spaces, and the story about how he started writing
the talent there.
And also a story that was born from a painful place. We've had, I'm just trying to think of the others that we've had that I might not be mentioning, but Siwela, the books. So I mean, out of that, I read the book Patient 12A by Lesedi Molefe, who's a South African author. It took me a while, to get through that book, because there were a lot of triggering moments, but it's a beautifully written book, and that's one of the people that I hope to bring in the future, so we can talk about the book. So, oh no, it's not Molefe, it's Molefi. Molefi. Lesedi Molefi. No, Molefi. Molefe is Fe. Yeah. So every single episode has had moments where I've just like, I've been even in awe of the conversation.
I think what I think you need to just share is that after every episode, I see how fulfilled you are. I think you take so many lessons from every conversation, and I don't think you thought about this, but these conversations are helping you rebuild.
Oh yeah, every single one of these conversations has left something in me. The Vikela one, let me talk about that, because that's been the best performing so far, which just blew my mind. I mean, when I did that episode, with every episode, actually, not just that one, I'm in the moment, right? And I'm having, especially as a host, I'm having to preempt the next question and how I'm driving the conversation. So there's a lot of things that people say that I might miss, the impact of which I might miss. So when we do the post-production work, again, I've got my lens of making sure that it's going to come out right, and that I'm picking up moments that will work out really well, that we can use as shorts and as clips and things like that. But then what I always do is at the end of it all, when the episode is uploaded, I go back and I watch it as if I were an audience member. And the Vikela conversation in particular, I struggled with that conversation during the conversation. I remember you saying, it's him. He needs to be talking, not you.
Now it's your moment.
Now it's your moment.
Talk away.
And I also remember when I had to upload it thinking, this is going to, maybe, I don't know if my audience is going to resonate with this content, because it's so deep and it's so reflective and it's so self-mastery like, and I don't know that people are going to resonate with it, because it hasn't, it was the most different of all the conversations I had. But then I went back and I watched it, and I remember I sent him a message afterwards, and I said, thank you for what you've said. Not just for the fact that you came and you were my guest, but for the things you've said that have poured into me. So definitely there's been lessons that I have pulled. There have been relationships that I have built. There has been moments that I have recognized for myself the strength in me, even when I feel at my absolute, lowest. My kids have loved it. The poor things are always like, Mommy, I told somebody that you're a podcaster. Like, I don't know that you can call me that. No, Mommy, you've got a podcast.
Yeah,
so
you do.
yeah,
and you
yeah.
must own it. And
Yeah,
that's
I
the
guess I
thing
should.
about you. You're just too modest about. And I remember when you were a corporate bae, and I'd be like, girl, if this was me, I'd be here. I'd be here. And you never did that, and you still don't.
No.
And
I find that very difficult.
it is, but you're learning.
Yeah.
You're now building a following. You're obsessed
Sure.
with followers. You're obsessed with your content. I mean,
listen. Do you know what the
How
most
has that-
difficult moments been for me on this podcast, which is crazy? It's never about the actual content or what it's always, or even like how, an episode can perform badly, but there's nothing more painful than losing a subscriber.
Yeah.
Please stop unfollowing.
Please like, follow, subscribe.
Yeah.
Hey, like, follow,
Listen,
retweet,
that is. I mean, I have counted.
Subscribe, guys.
I have counted because we're not even at 1,000 yet. Every single subscription that comes, I have counted.
You do,
every single one.
I have a feeling that you actually see it live.
Oh yes, I do.
Because that's how obsessed you are. Like when that one lands, you're like, yo, you see,
I take pictures. Yes, I got one more.
And
so the most painful times are probably when somebody unsubscribes, and I get it. You see content, it doesn't resonate. Why did I subscribe to this again? And as an audience, I get that because I do that. Yeah. But as the podcaster who's trying to build, I just think to myself, oh, if only you knew that one little thing you just did has killed me. That's broken my heart into little pieces. But I'm getting used to. And I was saying to somebody the other day, this is the hardest 1,000 anything I've ever had to work for. I never had to work 1,000 for 1,000 anything this hard. Okay, like 1,000 rand was never this hard to work for. 1,000 policies at Yalu was never this hard to work for. 1,000 views of my TV ads have never been this difficult to work for. But this is the hardest 1,000 I've ever had to work on. So yeah, those have been some of my favorite moments.
I think it's character building. Some wise young lady would always tell me, my daughter, Mommy, that's character building. When things like that happen, and I'm like, wasn't doing it, but
character building.
But I've also just seen how your character has just been refined over this journey, and not that you didn't have any, but it's just been sharpened.
Point, that might be what you're suggesting.
Girl, come back, focus.
Okay.
It's not about
I'm back
at this point. Thank you.
But do you know what I've also done? Yeah. I've watched a lot of Housewives.
Okay.
It sounds strange, but
it
does sound strange because I just used to think, like, why are we watching people live their lives and then all they do is fight and bicker and like? But there is actually so much interesting, even just like behaviors and interesting language and interesting actions and interesting storylines and narratives that are followed by different housewives. I'm now on season 7 of The Housewives of Potomac. I finished it yesterday. Oh, wow. I'm looking forward to season 8. I know it's been out for a long time. I've only just gotten into it. I know. Okay. But every single one of them comes with the intention of having a narrative. And a lot of us look at those women and think these are blonde. These girls are so blonde. They are master businesswomen. Wow. Because to be able to build a narrative for every season, for people to like you, for people to follow you, for people to buy your products, because a lot, for example, with Potomac ladies, a lot of them have branched out businesses and are doing incredibly well. That is because they were able to build a narrative around themselves continuously and consistently for every single season. And so for me, I have marveled at how even the things that we used to look at and used to look at and roll my eyes at, are actually things that have so much sense, and I think a lot of the time, especially when you've been a corporate person, you have a lot of you create a lot of complexity in your mind about building a business. You're like, oh my God, first you've got to make sure you've got HR, and then you've got to make sure you've got, dude, it doesn't I have to have this beautiful website, and it doesn't.
That's why we never get started in most instances.
Exactly.
I mean, if you look back, how you wanted to do so many things, but just because things were not in place, things were not perfect, you just never got off the ground.
Exactly.
But now you're learning and embracing that journey of imperfection, but you're moving forward.
Yeah, now my biggest thing is just start. Anybody who asks me, I'm like, just start. I've only got R1, just start, going. And that's what happened with this podcast. I had to just start. And then there's this meme that says the best podcast had to have an episode 1, right? It had to have an episode 10. Yeah, right?
Episode 10.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, for me, the just start principle has really helped me. Even when we did the transition from Space Fanatics to the Fanatic Mindset, I had to get to a place where I realized that the Space Fanatics thing wasn't taking off. Yeah. And I am the kind of person who makes decisions quite quickly, sometimes to my detriment, but I'm not a procrastinator, unlike you.
Okay, it's not about me, this show. Can you focus?
Yeah, but you do take some time to take.
Come back. You had a thought there. Continue.
Yeah. I make decisions very quickly, sometimes to my detriment, and I could tell that Space Fanatics wasn't going far quickly. Like, we're not going anywhere. Lapa. How do I very quickly pivot?
Change gear.
Change gear.
You did.
But yet the principle of fanaticism still stayed,
because that's the base.
That's the base. And so my thought process there was, how do I take my skills and do something with them that remains true to who and what I am? And so that's how the Fanatic Mindset was born. And the Fanatic Mindset, by the way, is not just the name of the podcast. That's why the podcast is called the Fanatic Mindset with Tlalane Ntuli, but the business is called the Fanatic Mindset. And the business is actually a brand and growth strategy consulting firm. So I work with small businesses, sometimes medium to large businesses, to help them craft their growth strategies and their brand strategies, to talk about how do you gain market access, how do you maximize the market access that you do have, because you have a lot of corporates that have great market access strategies and even great market access relationships, but don't know how to optimize them and activate them. So what I do is I help businesses say, if you don't have market access, how do we help? How do we start to help? How do we start to create market access? And how do I help you do that? And where you do have market access, how do we optimize it?
Okay, can you get a call to action on that? Because you just advertised your business, your other business.
Thefanaticmindset.co.za is the website for the consulting business. And if you're a small business or a medium-sized business, and you're kind of really in that space where you're thinking, how do I now take what I've started and I want to explode it, that's where I come in. Sometimes you're already big, but you're kind of thinking that there isn't a lot of growth for you. Where is that growth going to come from? That's the conversation we need to have. Basically it's about market growth. And for me, it's critical. There is no business that can succeed without thinking about where they're going to gain their market from. And I'm really, in particular, I'm passionate about the underserved market, if I can call it that. And actually on the website, you will see the first, it's kind of second from the landing page. We talk about, we work with purpose-led brands, because I believe that people, I always have, in all the work I've done, even as a marketer.
And it's been a challenge because in corporate, and we're not going to get into it, we've spoken about your corporate journey, but in corporate, you were not able to fully live that.
Harness that.
And harness that. And you would consider going back to corporate, right?
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, my kids have to eat. No, but also I just think that corporates do well when they have purpose-led leaders.
Yes, yeah.
And that's why I am so fanatical about working with purpose-led brands, because I believe that consumers want to do business
Yeah.
with organizations that see them as people, not just numbers, that are willing to put back, not just through CSI initiatives, but because they understand that for me as a corporate to be able to make money, I've got to ensure that my consumer base is economically active, right? If they're not economically active, if they don't have money to buy my product, then where do I expect them, how do I expect them to become my consumers? And so the reason I specifically say I don't want, for me, it's not about working with organizations that look at corporate investment as a separate CSI initiative that's kind of, got its own policies and it's a ticker box. I fundamentally believe that being purpose-led and being led by, the idea of making positive social impact should be built into business processes. So when you're selling,
I love how
I come
passionate, like you, yes, you have just.
That's a copper vein.
I think the point made.
Yeah.
And that's always been you. And I think this space, I think part of the journey is that you're trying to get stories that have an impact.
Yes.
And I think at this point, let's just throw forward to what you've got planned for.
Okay. So actually, I love how you put it. You want to tell stories that have impact. There are thousands of stories that have impact in South Africa. This one podcast couldn't touch them all. In fact, no podcast can touch them all. Even as a collective as podcasters, we probably can't touch them all, because there is so much excellence in our communities that we just don't hone in, the stories of which never get told. So in this podcast, when we started, I was very particular about not necessarily wanting to bring about people that were already getting a lot of media attention, who were celebrities in their own right. And I mean, that was a very deliberate decision. And I remember people would say, so how do you expect to gain followers? You've got to feature celebrity stories. And in my mind, I think there is a place for every story to be told. And so I'm quite comfortable being a niche podcaster, if that's what it's got to be. Because the one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to bring the stories that are being told by every single platform, and also being, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of being, made bigger than they really are. When people are like, I gave shoes at a school. There's 5 schools there's 5 pairs of shoes.
I think it's about being authentic.
It's about being authentic
in what you've been doing. And I just hope you continue, because as you say, there's just so many, shiny stories that get told.
Oh man,
so
that have such little impact.
Diamond in the rough.
Yes,
and just
tell
bring
that.
it out.
And I mean, a story like Jillian's. Right?
Yeah.
She's touching thousands of people through her products, but those
just
stories don't get told.
Just because she's not a celebrity, and that's what you're trying to do.
Then the second thing that I was very clear about is I didn't want to be, and still don't want to be, the kind of podcaster that talks about people's downfalls. This is the one podcast that if you're looking for gossip, I'm happy for you to unsubscribe. That's the only time I'll say to somebody, this is not, you're not on the right platform. I will never be the kind of podcast that spreads gossip and that highlights people's winter seasons so I can get followers. That's not the point of this. This is about building. And I'll never be the kind of podcast that tells horror stories to scare people into doing something. I hate that. Like there's so that's why I started it. I was comfortable also with starting the podcast, was because I felt like there is still room in that space where positive stories are being told to create yet another podcast. Because the one thing about South African podcasts, there's a lot of her husband beat her, or she was eaten by a snake, or she came back from the fires of hell. Like, how do we
feel good? But when you're feeling good, be real about it, because I think we've been made to told that people just snap and things happen. But we have to go through the real journey in conversations that you're having. on this platform, and I love how you now embracing that you're a podcast.
Ooh, I'm a
You're the struggle to get to
podcaster.
here. Like, girl, you're a podcaster. Own it.
Own it.
So well done.
Thank
Like,
you.
yo, you are indeed.
I think we've got like over 32,000 views we've had. So I guess that means I am a podcaster.
Girl,
Okay.
why
All
are you still questioning it?
Sorry.
You're doing so well. I just had to recognize that.
Yeah.
I think we're almost close to our conversation.
Yeah. Well, you wanted to know what I've got planned next.
Oh yes, throw forward. You just
throw
went
forward.
into you went
The
emotional,
purpose.
the
Yeah.
purpose, which is great. I love
I
that.
did.
But tell us what you've got planned.
So let me be clear. When I say I don't want to feature just celebrity conversations, it is not to say that there may not be a celebrity conversation that I see that I believe is worth telling, right? So if you see on this podcast a conversation with a celebrity, it's because there's a particular angle of their story that I believe will hasn't been told, that I believe will help somebody get out of bed. Because I've been helped by a lot of podcasters to get out of bed when I couldn't get out of bed. And then, so I've got one or two, like I mean, I can't say now because all of them haven't, I'm still in conversations, but somebody like a Wilson Bingosi, who is a broadcasting veteran in South Africa, who is got an incredible story, an incredible story, and it deserves to be heard. You know what I'm saying? It's not controversial. It's not any of that stuff. But the things that people can learn from that man's story. I'm still going to focus on entrepreneurs, females that are doing it, males that are doing it, people that are changing their communities in one way or another, and creating life for themselves and their families. Would love to talk to Lesedi, as I've said. Hopefully he will come. Want to talk to authors. That's another niche of I love reading. I do love reading.
What are you reading at the moment? Sorry, just to, because you're always reading.
Do you know what happens when you go? I know there still is. Do you know what happens when you go into your darkest place? And it happened to you as well. You stop doing the things that bring you joy. So I stopped reading for a while. Lesedi's book is actually the last book I read, but I've got lots of books
that
on my
keep buying and you don't
read. I haven't read yet.
Okay. I think on that note, your final thoughts about where you've been, where you are, and where you're going.
Where I'm going, I know is God's plan. I don't know what it looks like, but I know it's good. Because He is God, and His plans for our lives are always good. And the Bible says that. He is not the kind of God that would walk us through the valley of the shadow of death to end up in a place that is not meant for us. Where I am now is I'm healing still. But there's light at the end of the tunnel.
It is so bright. And I want you to believe that.
Amen.
And keep trusting that God has you. You've seen testimonies around you. It's going to happen. And I keep saying, I cannot wait. Because when that guy does wonders for you all the time.
Thank you, my friend.
Keep believing. And I love you. And I'm so glad you managed to open up. And I think you should close your show, hey?
Should I? Okay. So that was episode 10. Remember to subscribe, follow, and like. This is a bit of a weird one for me. Follow, subscribe, and like. And we'll see you again for episode 11.